Carmen Delgado had spent 3 years pushing her cleaning cart through the marble halls of Pinnacle Corporate Center, enduring the snickers and dismissive comments from security guards who saw her as nothing more than furniture with a mop. But when a visiting Navy SEAL caught sight of the faded tattoo on her wrist, during what should have been just another ordinary Tuesday, everything these guards thought they knew about the quiet woman they'd been mocking was about to be shattered. Forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. At 4:30 a.m. every morning, while Phoenix still slept under a blanket of desert darkness, Carmen Delgado's alarm would pierce the silence of her small studio apartment. By 5:15 a.m., she was already walking through the employee entrance of Pinnacle Corporate Center, her worn sneakers making barely a whisper against the polished floors. At 42, Carmen had perfected the art of being invisible, a skill that served her well in her current life, though it had been earned through circumstances she preferred not to remember. The 30-story glass tower housed Apex Technologies, one of the Southwest's most prestigious defense contractors. The building's lobby gleamed with black marble and chrome, a testament to corporate success that stood in stark contrast to the woman who cleaned it each dawn. Carmen's uniform was simple: navy blue scrubs, comfortable shoes, and a hairnet that kept her dark brown hair neatly contained. Her cleaning cart was her constant companion, loaded with supplies that most people never bothered to notice, just like the woman who pushed it. Derek Walsh, the head of security for Pinnacle Corporate Center, had made it clear from Carmen's first day that cleaning staff were to be seen and not heard. A former mall cop who had worked his way up through various security companies, Derek treated his position like he was guarding Fort Knox rather than an office building. His thick Boston accent carried an authority he'd never actually earned, and his treatment of the cleaning staff bordered on contempt. "Hey, Maria," Derek would call out, deliberately getting Carmen's name wrong despite 3 years of corrections. "Make sure you don't touch anything important up on the executive floors. Some of us actually have real jobs here." His crew of security guards would always laugh on cue. There was Tyler Brooks, fresh out of high school and eager to impress his boss with his casual cruelty. Frank Morrison, a heavy-set man in his 50s who'd found his calling in petty authority after years of failed ventures. And Steve Hassan, who somehow managed to make his uniform look disheveled even at the start of his shift. "I don't know why they even let these people up to the important floors," Tyler would whisper loud enough for Carmen to hear. "What if she sees something classified? What if she can't even read English?" Carmen never responded to their comments. She would simply adjust her grip on her mop, nod politely, and continue with her work. But those who bothered to look closely might have noticed how her shoulders remained perfectly square, how her movements carried an economy of motion that spoke of discipline rather than fatigue, and how her dark eyes seemed to catalog everything around her with the precision of someone trained to notice details that others missed. The truth was, Carmen noticed everything. She knew that Frank Morrison spent most of his shift playing games on his phone instead of monitoring the security cameras. She knew that Tyler Brooks often left his post to flirt with the young women who worked in accounting. She knew that Derek Walsh regularly took extended breaks in his office, supposedly reviewing security protocols, but actually watching sports highlights on his computer. She also knew things that would have surprised them. She knew that the lock on the emergency exit on the 10th floor had been malfunctioning for 2 weeks, creating a security vulnerability that none of them had noticed. She knew that the delivery driver who brought office supplies every Thursday had been taking photos of the lobby directory with his phone, behavior that should have raised red flags. She knew that the new intern in the IT department had been accessing files well above his clearance level, downloading information that someone with training would recognize as potentially valuable to competitors. But Carmen kept these observations to herself. Her job was to clean, not to secure the building. Her role was to be invisible, not to demonstrate the skills that had once made her anything but. Every morning, she would start her rounds on the ground floor, working her way methodically through each level. The executive floors were always her final stop, partly because they required the most attention to detail, and partly because the early morning hours meant she was less likely to encounter the building's high-powered occupants. Carmen preferred it that way. The fewer people who saw her, the fewer questions would be asked. Her cleaning cart was a masterpiece of organization. Every spray bottle had its designated place, every tool served a specific purpose, and everything was maintained with a precision that would have impressed a drill sergeant. The security guards saw it as obsessive behavior from someone who took a menial job too seriously. They had no way of knowing that such attention to detail had once been the difference between life and death in places where mistakes carried consequences. Far more serious than a poorly mopped floor, Carmen's apartment was equally Spartan. A small one-bedroom unit in a complex that catered to working-class residents. It contained the minimum necessary for comfortable living and nothing more. No photographs on the walls, no personal mementos, no evidence of a life lived before she arrived in Phoenix 3 years ago. The only exception was a small wooden box she kept in her bedroom closet, locked and hidden beneath winter clothes she rarely needed in the desert climate. The people in her building knew her as a quiet neighbor who paid her rent on time and never caused trouble. The managers at Pinnacle Corporate Center knew her as a reliable employee who never missed a day and never complained. The security guards knew her as a target for their casual cruelty, someone they could mock to entertain themselves during the long hours of their shifts. None of them knew that Carmen Delgado wasn't her real name. None of them knew that the cleaning supplies in her cart weren't the only thing she was trained to handle with deadly precision. None of them knew that the woman they dismissed as ignorant spoke 4 languages fluently and held advanced degrees in engineering and computer science from institutions that most of them couldn't have gotten into on their best day. And none of them knew that the faded tattoo on her left wrist, barely visible beneath the long sleeve she always wore, told a story of service and sacrifice that would have commanded their respect instead of their ridicule. As Carmen finished her rounds each morning, she would return her cart to the supply closet, clock out, and walk to the small diner 3 blocks away where she would eat breakfast alone, reading a paperback novel and drinking coffee that was strong enough to keep her alert for the rest of the day. The routine was comforting in its predictability, a sharp contrast to the life she had once lived, where no 2 days were ever the same and survival often depended on adapting to constantly changing circumstances. She had chosen this life deliberately. After everything that had happened, after all the debriefings and paperwork that didn't officially exist, she had wanted normal. A regular job, regular people, regular problems. The kind of existence where the biggest crisis was running out of toilet paper on the executive floors. Not coordinating rescue operations in hostile territory while under enemy fire. But normal, Carmen was beginning to realize, was a luxury that people like her might never truly be able to afford. There were too many people who remembered, too many loose ends, too many ghosts from operations that officially never happened. The skills that had once made her invaluable to her country were the same skills that made it impossible for her to truly disappear. Still, for 3 years she had managed to maintain the illusion. She was just Carmen Delgado, cleaning lady, invisible and unremarkable. Tomorrow would bring the same routine, the same casual cruelty from the security guards, the same quiet satisfaction of work completed with precision and care. What she didn't know was that tomorrow would also bring Captain Ryan O'Brien, a Navy SEAL whose trained eye would spot something that would change everything. Something that would remind her that some secrets were too powerful to stay buried forever, and some identities were impossible to leave behind completely. The storm was coming. And Carmen's carefully constructed world of anonymity was about to be tested in ways she had hoped never to face again. Tuesday morning arrived with the same desert heat that had been building for weeks. But inside the climate-controlled environment of Pinnacle Corporate Center, the only temperature that mattered was the cold indifference that greeted Carmen as she began her daily routine. Derek Walsh was already at his post, coffee in hand, ready to begin another day of asserting his authority over people he considered beneath him. "Well, well, well," Derek announced loudly as Carmen wheeled her cart through the lobby. "Look who decided to show up. Maria, right? Or is it Mercedes today? I can never keep track of you people." Tyler Brooks snickered from his position behind the security desk, his youth making him eager to participate in anything that might earn him points with his supervisor. "Maybe it's Consuela? That's what they're all called, right?" Frank Morrison looked up from his phone long enough to add his own contribution. "As long as she knows which end of the mop goes in the bucket, I don't care what we call her." Carmen continued pushing her cart toward the elevators, her expression unchanged. She had learned long ago that responding to ignorance only encouraged it. But as she passed the security desk, her trained eye caught something that the guards themselves had missed completely. The visitor log from the previous evening showed 3 entries that didn't match the security camera timestamps. Either someone had been falsifying records, or people were entering the building without proper documentation. In her previous life, such discrepancies would have triggered immediate investigation protocols. In her current life, it was none of her business. "Hey, I'm talking to you," Derek called out, his voice carrying the irritation of someone who expected immediate deference. "When someone speaks to you, the polite thing to do is respond." Carmen turned back toward the security desk, her movements careful and controlled. "Good morning, Mr. Walsh. I hope you have a pleasant day." Her English was flawless, carrying just the slightest hint of an accent that could have been from anywhere in Latin America. What the security guards didn't know was that Carmen spoke English better than most of them did, along with Spanish, Arabic, and Mandarin. Language skills that had once been essential for operations in some of the world's most dangerous regions. "See? Was that so hard?" Derek's smile was condescending. "A little politeness goes a long way in this country." Tyler leaned back in his chair, emboldened by Derek's performance. "I bet she doesn't even understand half of what we're saying. They come here and take our jobs, but they don't bother learning the language properly." "The language barrier explains a lot," Frank added, not looking up from his phone. "Like why she takes forever to clean the executive floors. Probably can't read the signs telling her what not to touch." Carmen absorbed their comments without reaction, but her mind was already processing information that would have alarmed them if they'd been capable of recognizing its significance. Tyler's casual mention of "our jobs" revealed an economic anxiety that made him susceptible to manipulation. Frank's assumption about her reading comprehension showed how their prejudices created blind spots in their assessment of potential threats. Derek's need to assert dominance suggested someone who could be predictably provoked if the right pressure was applied. These weren't just idle observations. They were the kind of psychological profiles that Carmen had once compiled on targets and assets and environments where understanding human motivation could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. The fact that she was unconsciously analyzing her tormentors showed how deeply ingrained her training had become. "You know what I heard?" Tyler said, lowering his voice in a way that ensured Carmen could still hear every word. "I heard that some of these cleaning companies don't even do background checks. They just hire anyone who shows up with a mop." Derek nodded sagely, as if this revelation confirmed his worst suspicions. "Probably why corporate makes us keep an eye on them. Can't trust people who don't go through proper security clearance." The irony was almost painful. Carmen's security clearance had once been so high that most of the people in this building wouldn't have been permitted to know it existed. She had undergone background investigation so thorough that investigators had interviewed her third-grade teacher and her childhood dentist. She had been trusted with information that could affect national security and had proven that trust in operations that saved thousands of lives. But to Derek Walsh and his crew, she was just another undocumented worker who couldn't be trusted. Around important documents. Carmen reached the elevator and pressed the button for the 15th floor, beginning her systematic work through the building. Each level had its own rhythm, its own challenges, its own secrets that she couldn't help but notice, even though she tried to focus only on her assigned tasks. The 15th floor housed the accounting department, where she had observed that one of the senior managers regularly stayed late to access files that should have been restricted during off hours. The 18th floor contained the legal department, where sensitive documents were often left unsecured on desks overnight. The 22nd floor was home to the Research and Development Division, where she had noticed that the supposedly secure disposal bins for classified materials were routinely overfilled and inadequately monitored. Any one of these security lapses would have triggered immediate corrective action in the facilities where Carmen had once worked. But Pinnacle Corporate Center operated under the illusion that corporate espionage was something that happened to other companies in other cities, to other people. As she worked, Carmen found herself thinking about the visitor log discrepancies. She had noticed 3 people had supposedly signed in during the evening shift, but the security cameras showed only 2 individuals entering the building. Either the guards were falsifying records to make it appear they were more attentive than they actually were, or someone had gained access to the building without going through proper channels. Neither possibility was reassuring. Carmen finished the 15th floor and moved up to the 18th, where the morning staff was beginning to arrive. She timed her work to avoid the busiest periods, preferring to clean around the edges of corporate activity rather than through its center. The fewer people who saw her, the fewer opportunities for interaction, and the smaller the chance that someone might ask questions she preferred not to answer, but avoidance had its limits. As she was emptying trash bins in the legal department, one of the junior associates stopped her with a friendly smile. "Excuse me, I'm sorry to bother you," the young woman said. "I'm Amanda Foster, the new office manager. I don't think we've been properly introduced." Carmen looked up from her work, noting Amanda's genuine attempt at courtesy. It was a refreshing change from the security guard's casual cruelty. "Carmen Delgado, I clean the building." "Well, Carmen, I wanted you to know that if you ever need anything or have any concerns about the work environment, please don't hesitate to come to me. Everyone deserves to be treated with respect." The kindness in Amanda's voice was unexpected, and for a moment, Carmen felt a pang of something she had almost forgotten: the possibility of normal human connection. "Thank you, Miss Foster. That's very kind." As Amanda walked away, Carmen realized that her carefully maintained isolation was becoming more difficult to sustain. People like Amanda reminded her that not everyone in this building saw her as invisible or inferior. Some still recognized the basic humanity that Derek Walsh and his security team seemed determined to deny, but recognition was dangerous. The more people who noticed her, the greater the chance that someone would ask the right questions or make the connections that could unravel the new life she had built. Carmen finished her work on the 18th floor and moved toward the executive levels, where tomorrow she would encounter someone whose training would make him impossible to fool. Someone who would see past her carefully constructed facade and recognize what the security guards had missed completely. Someone who would understand exactly what the faded tattoo on her wrist really meant. Wednesday morning brought an unexpected challenge that would test Carmen's ability to maintain her carefully constructed facade. A water pipe had burst on the 26th floor during the night, flooding the hallway and seeping into several offices that housed sensitive research materials. The overnight security team had managed to shut off the water, but the cleanup required immediate attention to prevent permanent damage to expensive equipment, and irreplaceable documents. Derek Walsh stood in the lobby, clipboard in hand, looking like a general surveying a battlefield. "This is a disaster," he announced to anyone within earshot. "Corporate's going to have my head if we don't get this cleaned up properly. Where's the cleaning lady? Maria, get over here." Carmen approached with her cart, already assessing the situation from the water stains visible on Derek's shoes and the damp smell that had begun to permeate the lower floors. Water damage in a high-rise building was serious business, requiring specific protocols to prevent mold growth, electrical hazards, and structural problems. "You're going to need to work faster than usual today," Derek continued, his tone suggesting that Carmen's normal pace was somehow inadequate. "Corporate's sending some big shot to inspect the damage, and I need this place looking perfect before he gets here." Tyler Brooks chimed in from behind the security desk. "Think she can handle something this complicated? This isn't just pushing a mop around." Frank Morrison looked up from his ever-present phone. "Maybe we should call a real cleaning service. This seems like a job for professionals." Carmen nodded politely and headed toward the elevator, but her mind was already working through the technical challenges involved. Water damage mitigation required understanding air circulation patterns, humidity control, material science, and electrical safety protocols. It was exactly the kind of complex problem-solving that her previous training had prepared her for, though in very different contexts. When the elevator doors opened on the 26th floor, Carmen saw immediately that the situation was worse than Derek had described. Water had spread through 3 separate office suites, soaking carpets, seeping into drywall, and creating puddles around expensive computer equipment. The overnight security team had done their best, but they had made several critical errors that would complicate the cleanup process. Carmen began by identifying the source of the leak and ensuring that the water supply was completely shut off. She traced the pipe system using knowledge that no cleaning lady should have possessed, understanding the building's infrastructure in ways that spoke of engineering training rather than janitorial experience. Next, she began prioritizing the cleanup based on factors that weren't immediately obvious. She moved computers and sensitive documents away from areas where water might still be seeping through the walls. She opened windows in a specific pattern that would maximize airflow, without creating cross-drafts that could spread moisture to unaffected areas. She positioned industrial fans that she requisitioned from the building's maintenance department with the precision of someone who understood fluid dynamics and air circulation patterns. Her movements were efficient and purposeful, lacking the hesitation that would be expected from someone encountering this type of emergency for the first time. She worked with the systematic approach of someone who had been trained to remain calm under pressure and to solve complex problems quickly and effectively. Amanda Foster arrived on the 26th floor mid-morning to assess the situation for her report to corporate headquarters. What she found surprised her completely. "Carmen, this is incredible work," Amanda said, surveying the organized cleanup operation. "How did you know to set up the ventilation system this way? And positioning the equipment like this? It's exactly what a professional restoration company would do." Carmen paused in her work, realizing that her competence was drawing exactly the kind of attention she had hoped to avoid. "I've seen water damage before," she said simply. "Common sense." But Amanda's trained eye, she had managed facilities for 3 different companies before joining Apex Technologies, recognized that this went far beyond common sense. The cleanup was being executed with a level of technical sophistication that suggested advanced training in emergency response protocols. "Where did you learn about water damage restoration?" Amanda asked gently, her curiosity clearly genuine, rather than suspicious. Carmen felt the familiar tension that came with having to deflect questions about her background. "Previous job," she said, returning her attention to extracting water from the carpet using a technique that minimized fiber damage while maximizing moisture removal. Amanda watched for a few more minutes, noting details that impressed her professional sensibilities. Carmen had correctly identified which materials could be salvaged and which needed to be discarded. She had established a drying protocol that would prevent mold growth without over-drying sensitive documents. She had even identified potential electrical hazards that the overnight security team had missed completely. "Have you ever considered working in facilities management?" Amanda asked. "Your skills are really impressive." The question hung in the air like a challenge to Carmen's carefully maintained cover story. Facilities management would require background checks, references, documentation of her previous experience, all things that would lead to questions she couldn't answer honestly. "I like cleaning," Carmen replied, her tone polite but final. "Simple work, no complications." But even as she said it, Carmen knew that her performance today had created complications. Amanda was too observant, too knowledgeable about facilities management, to simply forget what she had witnessed. The questions would continue, and eventually, they would become impossible to deflect. Meanwhile, Derek Walsh had arrived on the 26th floor to survey the cleanup progress, expecting to find chaos that would justify calling in expensive professional services. Instead, he found an operation that ran with military precision. "What the hell is going on here?" he demanded, clearly frustrated that his expectations weren't being met. "This looks too organized. Did someone else come in to help?" Tyler Brooks, who had accompanied Derek upstairs, walked through the cleaned areas with obvious skepticism. "There's no way she did all this by herself. Someone else had to be involved." Frank Morrison was examining the ventilation setup with the incomprehension of someone who had never encountered systematic problem solving. "This is exactly how they do it on those disaster cleanup shows. How does a cleaning lady know about professional restoration techniques?" Carmen continued working, but she could feel the weight of their scrutiny building. Each successful element of the cleanup operation was creating doubt about her claimed background and capabilities. The very competence that made her valuable as an employee was making her dangerous as a person trying to remain invisible. Derek studied the scene with the suspicion of someone who had built his career on assuming the worst about people. "Something doesn't add up here," he muttered. "Cleaning ladies don't know this stuff. This is professional level work." "Maybe she's worked for restoration companies before," Tyler suggested, though his tone indicated he didn't believe his own theory. "Then why is she cleaning offices instead of doing restoration work?" Frank asked. "That kind of experience would pay a lot more than what she's making here." The questions were getting closer to the heart of Carmen's dilemma. How could she explain having advanced skills without revealing the context in which she had learned them? How could she demonstrate competence without inviting investigation into her background? As Carmen worked through the afternoon, completing a cleanup that should have required a team of professionals, she realized that her carefully constructed invisibility was beginning to crack. The water damage had forced her to reveal capabilities that didn't match her cover story, and the people around her were starting to notice the inconsistencies. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new questions, and eventually, someone whose training would make it impossible for her to hide in plain sight any longer. Someone who would recognize not just her skills, but the specific type of training that had produced them. The storm that had been building around Carmen's secret identity was about to break, and when it did, nothing would ever be the same again. Thursday morning arrived with the kind of crisp desert air that promised another scorching day in Phoenix. But inside Pinnacle Corporate Center, the atmosphere was charged with anticipation. Word had spread through the building that Apex Technologies was hosting a high-level security consultation with a military contractor, and Derek Walsh was determined to prove that his team could handle whatever scrutiny came their way. "Listen up, people," Derek announced during the morning briefing, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had watched too many police procedurals. "We've got some military hotshot coming in today to evaluate our security protocols. Want everyone on their best behavior. That means no personal phone calls, no extended breaks, and definitely no screwing around. Tyler Brooks straightened in his chair, eager to impress. What kind of military guy are we talking about, boss? Navy SEAL, Derek replied, clearly enjoying the way the words commanded instant respect. Captain Ryan O'Brien. He's consulting on security upgrades for defense contractors. Apparently, corporate thinks we need an outside perspective on our operations. Frank Morrison looked up from his phone with uncharacteristic interest. A real SEAL, like the guys who got Bin Laden? The same, Derek confirmed. Which is why I need you all to remember that we're professionals here. No amateur hour nonsense. What Derek didn't mention, because he didn't know, was that Captain Ryan O'Brien's visit wasn't routine. Recent intelligence reports had indicated that several defense contractors were being targeted for corporate espionage, and Apex Technologies' work on classified military projects made them a particularly attractive target. O'Brien's evaluation would determine whether the company's current security measures were adequate to protect sensitive information. Carmen arrived for her shift at 5:15 a.m. as usual, but she could sense the increased tension in the building immediately. The security guards were more alert than normal, their casual banter replaced by focused attention to their duties. Even the overnight cleaning crew seemed more rushed, as if they were trying to finish their work before something important happened. She began her rounds on the lower floors, working with her usual methodical precision. But as she moved through the building, Carmen found herself unconsciously cataloging security vulnerabilities with greater intensity than usual. The mention of a military security consultant had triggered old instincts, reminding her of the countless facility assessments she had once conducted in her previous life. The emergency exit on the 10th floor was still malfunctioning, though none of the security staff had noticed. The visitor access logs continued to show discrepancies that suggested either sloppy record-keeping or unauthorized entry. The disposal procedures for sensitive documents remained inadequate, with classified materials being mixed with regular trash in ways that made them vulnerable to retrieval by hostile actors. Any one of these issues would have failed a proper security inspection. But Carmen knew that pointing them out would raise questions about how a cleaning lady had acquired such detailed knowledge of security protocols. Captain Ryan O'Brien arrived at Pinnacle Corporate Center at 0900 hours, and his presence was immediately felt throughout the building. At 38, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone who had been tested in the world's most dangerous environments and had proven himself capable of handling whatever challenges arose. His civilian clothes, dark slacks, white shirt, and navy blazer couldn't disguise the military bearing that marked him as clearly as if he had been wearing a uniform. Derek Walsh met him in the lobby with the kind of nervous energy that comes from wanting to impress someone whose approval actually matters. Captain O'Brien, welcome to Pinnacle Corporate Center. I'm Derek Walsh, head of security. We're honored to have you here. O'Brien's handshake was firm but brief, his eyes already scanning the lobby with the systematic attention of someone trained to assess threats and vulnerabilities. Thank you, Mr. Walsh. I'm looking forward to seeing your operation. We run a tight ship here, Derek assured him, falling into step as O'Brien began a walking inspection of the security desk. State-of-the-art equipment, highly trained personnel, comprehensive protocols for every situation. O'Brien nodded politely, but his trained eye was already identifying issues that Derek's team had missed. The security cameras had blind spots that could be exploited by someone with basic knowledge of surveillance systems. The visitor check-in process relied too heavily on trust and not enough on verification. The security guards themselves showed signs of complacency that suggested they had never encountered a real threat. As they moved through the building, O'Brien conducted what appeared to be a routine inspection, but was actually a comprehensive threat assessment. He noted escape routes, communication systems, emergency procedures, and the general security culture of the organization. His questions were precise and revealing, designed to expose weaknesses without immediately alarming the people he was. Evaluating, how do you handle after-hours access? He asked as they reviewed the visitor logs. Strict protocols, Derek replied confidently. No one gets in without proper authorization and escort. O'Brien examined the logs more closely, immediately spotting the discrepancies that Carmen had noticed days earlier. I see 3 entries here from Tuesday night that don't correspond to your camera timestamps. Can you explain that? Derek's confidence faltered as he studied the records. There might be a clerical error. Sometimes the timestamps get confused when we're busy. Busy enough to let unauthorized personnel into a building that houses classified defense contracts. O'Brien's tone remained professional, but the implications of his question were clear as they continued the inspection. Moving from floor to floor, O'Brien's assessment of the security operation became increasingly critical. The gaps in coverage, the casual attitudes, and the fundamental misunderstanding of the threats facing a defense contractor painted a picture of an organization that was vulnerable to exactly the kind of sophisticated attacks that were becoming increasingly common. It was on the 22nd floor, as O'Brien was examining the research and development area, that he first encountered Carmen. She was cleaning the hallway outside the secure laboratories, her movements careful and systematic as she worked around the sensitive areas that required special clearance to access. O'Brien noticed her immediately, though not for the reasons that Derek Walsh and his team would have expected. It wasn't her ethnicity or her occupation that caught his attention. It was the way she moved. Carmen's posture was perfect, not the hunched shoulders of someone who spent their day bent over cleaning tasks, but the straight-backed bearing of someone who had been trained to maintain situational awareness at all times. Her head position allowed her to monitor the entire hallway while appearing to focus on her work. Her foot placement was precise, maintaining balance and mobility in ways that spoke of tactical training rather than janitorial experience. Most telling of all, when O'Brien appeared in her peripheral vision, Carmen's reaction was immediate and subtle. She didn't startle or look up with curiosity like most civilian employees would when encountering an obvious military presence. Instead, she acknowledged his presence with the kind of controlled awareness that suggested she had been trained to assess potential threats without appearing to do so. "Who is that?" O'Brien asked Derek, nodding toward Carmen. "Oh, that's just the cleaning lady," Derek replied dismissively. "Maria something. She's been here a few years, harmless." O'Brien continued watching Carmen as she worked, noting details that would have been invisible to untrained observers. The way she positioned her cleaning cart to provide cover while maintaining escape routes. The way she seemed to know exactly where the security cameras were without looking up at them. The way her movements suggested someone who was comfortable operating in controlled environments where precision and discretion were essential. "Has she been background checked?" O'Brien asked. "Corporate handles all that," Derek said with a shrug. "Cleaning services provide their own people. As long as they do the work and don't steal anything, we don't ask too many questions." That answer alone would have been enough to fail Apex Technology's security evaluation. But O'Brien was becoming increasingly interested in the woman, who was carefully avoiding eye contact while obviously listening to every word of their conversation. As they moved past Carmen toward the elevator, O'Brien caught a glimpse of something that made his blood run cold. As Carmen reached up to clean a high surface, her sleeve pulled back slightly, revealing a faded tattoo on her left wrist. The design was geometric, precise, and instantly recognizable to someone with O'Brien's background and clearance level. It was a SEAL team identifier, but not just any team. The specific pattern of lines and angles marked her as a member of one of the most classified units in the naval special warfare community. A unit that had been disbanded years ago after completing operations so sensitive that their existence had been officially denied. O'Brien's training kept his expression neutral, but his mind was racing through the implications of what he had just seen. The woman cleaning the hallways of Pinnacle Corporate Center wasn't just a former military member. She was someone who had been trusted with the most dangerous and sensitive missions in the arsenal of American Special Operations, someone who was supposed to be dead. The elevator ride to the 23rd floor felt like an eternity for Captain Ryan O'Brien. His mind was processing what he had just witnessed, running through classified databases and operational histories that most people didn't even know existed. The tattoo he had glimpsed on Carmen's wrist wasn't just military identification, it was a death certificate that had apparently been filed prematurely. Derek Walsh continued his commentary about building security protocols, oblivious to the fact that his guest's attention had shifted completely. O'Brien's responses became automatic, professional courtesy masking the storm of questions building in his mind. He had seen that specific tattoo design only once before, in a classified briefing about operations that had never officially occurred. The executive floors have additional security measures, Derek was explaining as they exited the elevator. Card access, biometric scanners, the works. Only authorized personnel can even get close to the sensitive areas. O'Brien nodded appropriately. But his thoughts were 3 floors below, focused on a woman who was systematically cleaning her way through a building that housed some of the most sensitive defense contracts in the Southwest. If his identification was correct, Carmen Delgado possessed skills and knowledge that could compromise national security or protect it, depending on whose side she was on. The geometric pattern of her tattoo had been burned into his memory during a briefing about SEAL Team 19, a unit that had been so deeply classified that even acknowledging its existence required clearance levels that most admirals didn't possess. The team had been disbanded in 2019 after completing a series of operations that had prevented what intelligence analysts later described as a sequence of events that could have led to global conflict. Official records listed all members of SEAL Team 19 as killed in action during a training exercise in the Pacific. Families had been notified, funerals had been held, benefits had been paid. The unit's existence had been scrubbed from all official documentation, and the surviving team members had been given new identities and relocated to ensure that their knowledge of classified operations couldn't be compromised, except that one of them was apparently working as a cleaning lady in Phoenix, Arizona. O'Brien's training in compartmentalized thinking allowed him to continue the security inspection while processing this revelation. He asked appropriate questions about access controls and emergency procedures, noted vulnerabilities in communication systems and personnel protocols, and maintained the professional demeanor expected of a military consultant. But part of his mind was already formulating plans for how to approach Carmen without compromising either of their positions. The challenge was significant. If Carmen was indeed a former member of SEAL Team 19, then approaching her incorrectly could trigger responses that would be dangerous for everyone involved. Members of that unit had been trained to assume that any unexpected contact was potentially hostile, and their reaction protocols emphasized elimination of threats over preservation of cover identities. On the other hand, if she was maintaining deep cover for operational reasons, then exposing her could compromise missions or endanger other personnel. The protocols for contact with supposedly deceased special operations personnel were complex and required careful consideration of multiple variables. Derek's voice broke through O'Brien's tactical planning. "Captain, is everything all right? You seem distracted." "Just processing what I've observed," O'Brien replied smoothly. "Your operation has some interesting aspects that I want to make sure I understand completely." They completed the inspection of the upper floors, with O'Brien making detailed notes about security vulnerabilities that would need to be addressed. But his primary focus remained on the woman 22 floors below, whose presence had transformed a routine security consultation into something far more complex and potentially dangerous. As they returned to the lobby, O'Brien made a decision that would change everything for everyone involved. "Mr. Walsh, I'd like to conduct some interviews with your staff as part of my assessment. Random sampling, you understand. Get a sense of how security protocols are understood and implemented at the operational level." Derek's chest puffed with pride. "Absolutely. My team knows their stuff. Interview any of them." "I was thinking more broadly," O'Brien said carefully. "Maintenance staff, cleaning crews, support personnel. Security is only as strong as its weakest link, and often, people who aren't directly involved in security operations see things that the security team might miss." Derek's expression shifted slightly, clearly uncomfortable with the idea that his authority might be questioned by what he considered to be support staff. "I suppose that makes sense, though I'm not sure what the cleaning lady could tell you." "About security, you'd be surprised," O'Brien replied. "People who move through the building on a regular basis often notice things that others miss. Unusual patterns, suspicious behavior, potential vulnerabilities." The irony of Derek's dismissive attitude toward Carmen wasn't lost on O'Brien. The head of security for a defense contractor was casually ignoring someone who might represent either the greatest security threat or the most valuable security asset in the entire building. "I'll need a private space for the interviews," O'Brien continued. "Somewhere people can speak freely without worrying about being overheard by their supervisors." Derek nodded, though his discomfort was obvious. "Conference room B is available. But I really don't think the support staff will have much to contribute." O'Brien's smile was professional but firm. "Let me be the judge of that. Could you arrange for the cleaning supervisor to meet me there in 20 minutes? I'd like to start with whoever has been here the longest." As Derek walked away to make the arrangements, O'Brien took a moment to consider the complexity of the situation he was about to enter. If Carmen was indeed a former member of SEAL Team 19, then she possessed knowledge of operations that had been classified at levels requiring presidential authorization. Her presence in this building could be coincidental, operational, or something far more dangerous. The protocols for such situations were clear but challenging to implement. First, confirm identity through methods that wouldn't compromise either party. Second, assess threat level and operational status. Third, determine appropriate action based on current mission parameters and security requirements. What the protocols didn't address was how to handle the emotional impact of discovering that someone you thought was dead was actually alive and working as a cleaning lady in Arizona. O'Brien had served with members of SEAL Team 19 during joint operations in Syria and Afghanistan. He had attended their memorial services, had delivered condolences to their families, had carried the weight of their supposed sacrifice for years. The possibility that some of them might still be alive, living under assumed identities, forced him to question everything he thought he knew about those operations and their aftermath. As he walked toward Conference Room B, O'Brien's mind shifted into the focused calm that had carried him through countless dangerous situations. Personal feelings would have to wait. Right now, he needed to determine whether Carmen Delgado represented a threat to national security or a resource that could help protect it. Either way, the conversation he was about to have would change both of their lives forever. 22 floors below, Carmen was finishing her work on the research and development level, unaware that her carefully maintained cover was about to be tested by someone whose training matched her own. The faded tattoo on her wrist, hidden beneath her sleeve, had already betrayed the secret she had spent 3 years protecting. The storm that had been building around her hidden identity was about to break, and when it did, she would discover that some ghosts from the past were impossible to bury, no matter how deep you tried to dig their graves. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Carmen received the message through Derek Walsh, delivered with his characteristic blend of authority and condescension. "Maria, the military guy wants to interview some of the staff. You're up first. Conference room B, 5 minutes. Try not to embarrass us." Tyler Brooks snickered from behind the security desk. "Hope you understand. Enough English to answer his questions properly." Frank Morrison looked up from his phone with amusement. "Maybe he wants to know if you've seen any suspicious activity. Like, do you know what suspicious means?" Carmen nodded politely and made her way toward the conference room, but every instinct she had developed during years of dangerous operations was screaming that this was not a routine interview. Military security consultants didn't typically waste time questioning cleaning staff unless they had specific reasons for doing so. As she walked through the corridors of Pinnacle Corporate Center, Carmen's mind shifted into the analytical mode that had kept her alive in hostile environments. The timing was suspicious. The Navy SEAL had been in the building for less than 2 hours, but he was already requesting private interviews with support staff. His questions during the inspection had been more detailed than Derek realized, focusing on access patterns and personnel verification protocols. Most concerning was the way Captain O'Brien had looked at her when they passed in the hallway. It wasn't the casual dismissal she had grown accustomed to from the security guards, nor was it the friendly interest that Amanda Foster had shown. It was the focused attention of someone who had noticed something that didn't fit their expectations. Carmen paused outside conference room B, taking a moment to center herself using techniques she had learned during her original training. Whatever was about to happen, she needed to be prepared for multiple scenarios while maintaining her cover identity as much as possible. She knocked on the door and entered when invited, finding Captain O'Brien seated at the conference table with a notepad and what appeared to be standard interview materials. His posture was relaxed but alert, and his eyes met hers with an intensity that confirmed her suspicions about the nature of this meeting. "Please have a seat," O'Brien said, his voice carrying the calm authority of someone accustomed to command situations. "I'm Captain Ryan O'Brien. I'm conducting a security assessment for Apex Technologies, and I'd like to ask you a few questions about your observations of the building's operations." Carmen sat down carefully, positioning herself with clear sight lines to the door and maintaining the humble posture expected of her cover identity. "Of course, Captain. I'm happy to help however I can." O'Brien studied her for a moment, noting details that confirmed his growing suspicions. Her English was flawless, without the hesitation or grammatical errors that might be expected from someone for whom it was a second language. Her posture, despite her obvious attempt to appear deferential, maintained the alertness of someone trained to assess threats and opportunities simultaneously. "How long have you been working at Pinnacle Corporate Center?" O'Brien asked, beginning with questions that appeared routine. 3 years, Carmen replied. "I started in 2021, and before that, I worked for other cleaning services in different cities." Carmen's answer was truthful but deliberately vague, the kind of response she had practiced for situations exactly like this one. O'Brien made notes on his pad, but his attention was focused on reading the subtle signs that her training couldn't completely suppress. The way she controlled her breathing, the positioning of her hands, the micro-expressions that revealed someone who was accustomed to high-stress situations, requiring careful management of information. "Have you noticed anything unusual during your time here? People who don't belong, activities that seem out of place, security procedures that concern you?" The question was more sophisticated than Derek Walsh would have asked, and Carmen recognized it as a professional assessment of her observational skills and situational awareness. She could provide a detailed analysis of the building's security vulnerabilities, but doing so would reveal capabilities that didn't match her cover story. "The emergency exit on the 5th floor has been broken for 2 weeks, she said carefully. "The lock doesn't work properly, And sometimes the visitor logs don't match what I see when I'm working late shifts. O'Brien's pen stopped moving. Those observations were exactly what a trained security professional would notice, presented with the kind of detail that suggested systematic observation rather than casual awareness. Can you be more specific about the visitor log discrepancies? Carmen hesitated, realizing that she was approaching the limits of what she could reveal without exposing her true background. Sometimes people sign in, but I don't see them in the building. Or I see people who didn't sign in. How often does this happen? Maybe once or twice a week. Usually during evening shifts when there are fewer security guards on duty. O'Brien leaned back in his chair, processing the implications of what Carmen had just told him. Her observations were not only accurate, but demonstrated the kind of systematic intelligence gathering that was characteristic of professional surveillance operations. Carmen, he said, his voice taking on a different tone, I need to ask you a more direct question, and I need you to understand that your answer could be very important for the security of this facility. Carmen felt her heart rate increase slightly, though her expression remained neutral. This was the moment she had been dreading for 3 years, the moment when someone with sufficient training and clearance would ask questions that she couldn't answer without revealing everything. Have you had any military training or experience in security operations? The question hung in the air between them like a challenge. Carmen could lie, maintaining her cover at the risk of compromising building security if there were genuine threats present. Or she could tell some version of the truth, exposing herself to investigation and potential discovery. Why do you ask? She said finally. O'Brien reached into his jacket and withdrew a photograph, a group shot of military personnel in tactical gear, faces obscured by equipment and shadows. Because your observational skills and threat assessment capabilities are consistent with professional training. And because I've seen that tattoo on your wrist before. Carmen's carefully maintained composure finally cracked slightly. The photograph, even with obscured faces, was unmistakably from one of SEAL Team 19's final operations. The terrain, the equipment, the tactical positioning, all of it was burned into her memory from missions that officially never happened. I don't know what you're talking about, she said. But both of them knew that her denial carried no conviction. O'Brien placed the photograph on the table between them. SEAL Team 19 was disbanded in 2019 after completing operations that prevented significant threats to national security. All team members were officially listed as killed in action during a training exercise. Their families were notified, funerals were held, and the unit's existence was classified beyond public access. Carmen stared at the photograph, seeing ghosts of people she had served with, people she had trusted with her life, people whose sacrifice had been erased from official history to protect operations that couldn't be acknowledged. But, O'Brien continued, I've just spent the morning watching someone move with tactical precision, demonstrate professional-level threat assessment skills, and provide security observations that could only come from advanced training. Someone whose tattoo identifies her as a member of a unit that's supposed to be extinct. The weight of 3 years of careful deception was crushing down on Carmen's shoulders. She had known this moment would come eventually, but she had hoped it would be later, somewhere else, under circumstances that gave her more control over the outcome. What do you want from me? She asked quietly. O'Brien's expression softened slightly, showing the first hint of the personal emotions he had been suppressing. I want to know if Sofia Martinez is still alive, or if Carmen Delgado killed her when she took this job. The use of her real name hit Carmen like a physical blow. Sofia Martinez had been the identity she had carried through the most dangerous operations of her military career. Carmen Delgado was the person she had become when Sofia Martinez was officially declared dead. Sofia Martinez died in the Pacific Ocean in 2019, Carmen said, her voice barely above a whisper. Carmen Delgado is just trying to live a quiet life. O'Brien nodded slowly, understanding the weight of what she had just confirmed. The question now is whether Carmen Delgado is going to help me figure out why someone might be targeting this facility, or whether Sofia Martinez needs to disappear again. The choice before Carmen was stark and immediate. She could maintain her cover and hope that whatever threats O'Brien had identified would resolve themselves without her involvement. Or she could acknowledge her true capabilities and risk everything she had built in her new life. Either way, the conversation had already changed everything. The secret she had protected for 3 years was now shared with someone who understood its implications completely, and somewhere in the building around them, forces were moving that would soon make the choice for her. The silence in Conference Room B stretched between Carmen and Captain O'Brien, like a chasm filled with classified secrets and painful memories. Carmen Sofia found herself staring at the photograph on the table, seeing not just tactical gear and obscured faces, but remembering the weight of responsibility that had shaped every decision during those final operations. "How did you know?" she asked finally, her voice carrying a weariness that came from 3 years of careful deception finally crumbling. O'Brien leaned forward slightly, his expression showing the respect of one professional addressing another. "The movement patterns were the first clue. You position yourself with constant awareness of exits and sight lines. You maintain perfect situational awareness while appearing to focus on mundane tasks. Most people can't do that without specific training." Carmen nodded slowly, recognizing the accuracy of his assessment. "And the tattoo?" "I attended the memorial service for SEAL Team 19, O'Brien said quietly. "I served with some of your team members during joint operations in Syria. When the Pacific training accident was announced, I helped carry the flag for Martinez, Sofia Elena, service number 4477 Delta 9. The sound of her full name and service number spoken aloud after 3 years of silence hit Carmen with unexpected force. She had been Sofia Martinez for so much longer than she had been Carmen Delgado, and hearing her true identity acknowledged by someone who understood its weight was both terrifying and deeply emotional. "Sofia Martinez died in that training accident," Carmen said firmly. "The woman sitting here is Carmen Delgado, who cleans offices and tries to live quietly." O'Brien studied her carefully, noting the tension between her words and the way she carried herself. "But Sofia Martinez's skills didn't die, did they? They've been helping Carmen Delgado survive in a world where being invisible is the only way to stay safe." Carmen was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications of this conversation. 3 years of careful anonymity had been shattered in a single morning by someone whose training allowed him to see past the facade she had constructed. "What happened to SEAL Team 19 wasn't a training accident," she said finally, her voice carrying the weight of secrets she had never been allowed to share. "We completed our final operation in the South China Sea. Intelligence had identified a coordinated effort by multiple hostile actors to acquire nuclear materials from several sources simultaneously. If they had succeeded, the weapons could have been deployed in American cities within months." O'Brien listened intently, recognizing the significance of what she was revealing. Operations at that level of classification were briefed only to individuals with presidential authorization, and the details were compartmentalized to prevent any single person from understanding the complete scope of the threat. The mission required capabilities that no officially acknowledged unit possessed, Carmen continued. "We had to infiltrate facilities in 3 different countries, extract intelligence, and neutralize threats without any evidence that American forces had been involved. Success meant preventing a nuclear attack on American soil. Failure meant global conflict, and you succeeded." "We completed the mission," Carmen corrected. "But the intelligence we gathered revealed that the operation had been compromised from the beginning. Someone with high-level access had been feeding information to hostile actors, enabling them to coordinate their efforts and anticipate our responses. O'Brien felt a chill as he processed the implications. Internal betrayal. At levels that required immediate and permanent action to prevent further compromise, Carmen said. SEAL Team 19 was disbanded not because we failed, but because we succeeded too well. We had uncovered corruption that reached into the highest levels of government and defense contracting. Our continued existence would have been evidence of operations that needed to remain secret forever. The weight of what she was revealing pressed down on both of them. Carmen was describing a scenario where American military personnel had been officially declared dead to protect classified operations and prevent exposure of treasonous activities by people in positions of trust. So they gave you new identities and relocated you to civilian lives, O'Brien said. Some of us, Carmen replied quietly. Others chose different options. A few decided that the official story should become reality. O'Brien understood immediately. Some members of SEAL Team 19 had chosen to actually die rather than live with the weight of what they had learned and done. The psychological burden of their final operation had been too great to carry into civilian life. Why cleaning? Why here? Carmen's smile was sad and ironic. Because no one notices cleaning ladies. Because working in buildings with classified contracts allows me to monitor for the kind of security vulnerabilities that could indicate renewed hostile activity. Because staying close to the defense industry helps me watch for signs that the threats we neutralized might be resurging. O'Brien realized that Carmen's position at Pinnacle Corporate Center wasn't random retirement, it was continued service under deep cover. She had been monitoring potential threats while maintaining the fiction of her death. The visitor log discrepancies you mentioned, the security vulnerabilities you've observed, you think they're connected to something larger? I think someone has been conducting systematic intelligence gathering on Apex Technologies classified projects, Carmen said, her voice taking on the analytical tone of a professional briefing. The patterns are consistent with preliminary stages of industrial espionage or preparation for more direct action. O'Brien felt pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. His security consultation had been requested because of general concerns about corporate espionage, but Carmen's observations suggested something more specific and immediate. What kind of direct action? Carmen stood up and moved to the conference room's window, looking out at the Phoenix skyline with the alert posture of someone scanning for threats. Apex Technologies is developing guidance systems for hypersonic weapons, encryption protocols for satellite communications, and defensive systems for critical infrastructure. Any one of those projects would be valuable to hostile actors. And all three together would provide the capability to conduct precision strikes against American targets while preventing coordinated response and compromising our ability to defend critical systems, Carmen said grimly. It's exactly the kind of integrated capability that SEAL Team 19 was created to prevent from falling into the wrong hands. O'Brien joined her at the window, both of them now looking at the building around them with new understanding. What had appeared to be a routine security consultation was actually an intersection of past operations with current threats. How long do you think we have? He asked. Based on the pattern of intelligence gathering I've observed, I'd estimate they're in final preparation stages. Days, not weeks. The implications were staggering. Carmen had been unknowingly positioned to detect renewed activity by the same hostile actors that SEAL Team 19 had supposedly neutralized years earlier. Her cover as a cleaning lady had allowed her to observe security vulnerabilities that a conventional assessment might have missed. What do you need from me? O'Brien asked. Carmen turned from the window, and for the first time since entering the conference room, her expression showed the full weight of her professional capabilities. I need you to help me determine whether this is a new threat requiring immediate response, or whether someone from our original operation survived and is trying to complete what we stopped. And if it's the latter, then Sofia Martinez is going. To have to die again, Carmen said quietly. But this time, she's taking her enemies with her. The transformation was complete. The quiet cleaning lady who had endured 3 years of mockery from security guards had become the highly trained operative who had once prevented nuclear attacks on American cities. And somewhere in the building around them, forces were moving. That would test every skill she had learned in a lifetime of service to her country. The fire alarm began blaring at 1:47 p.m., its piercing wail echoing through every floor of Pinnacle Corporate Center with the kind of urgency that demanded immediate attention. But Carmen and Captain O'Brien, still in Conference Room B, exchanged a look that spoke of shared training and mutual recognition of something that didn't feel right. Building evacuation procedures call for orderly exit through designated stairwells, O'Brien said, consulting his memory of the security briefing Derek Walsh had provided that morning. Carmen was already moving toward the door, but her posture was that of someone responding to a tactical situation rather than a routine emergency. The timing is too convenient. We've been talking for 45 minutes about security vulnerabilities and potential threats, and now there's a building-wide distraction that forces everyone into predictable evacuation patterns. They stepped into the hallway to find Derek Walsh rushing past with a handheld radio, barking orders into the device with the kind of panic that suggested he was operating well outside his actual capabilities. All units, implement emergency procedures. I want a full sweep of every floor before anyone goes home today. This could be the real thing. Tyler Brooks appeared at the end of the hallway, his youth making his nervousness obvious despite his attempts to project authority. Derek, the fire department says they didn't receive an automatic alarm from our system. They only got notified when someone called 911 from inside the building. Frank Morrison's voice crackled through Derek's radio. Ground floor is clear, but I'm seeing some unusual activity in the parking garage. There are vehicles down there that weren't here this morning. Carmen and O'Brien moved toward the stairwell with the flow of evacuating employees, but both of them were conducting their own assessment of the situation. The alarm had been triggered manually rather than by smoke detection, suggesting either a false alarm or deliberate activation to create confusion. The presence of unexpected vehicles in the parking garage indicated either poor security monitoring or intentional infiltration. This feels like a probe, Carmen said quietly as they descended the stairs among confused office workers. Create a crisis, observe response patterns, identify vulnerabilities in emergency procedures. O'Brien nodded, his training leading him to the same conclusion, or it's cover for something else entirely. Force everyone into evacuation mode while a smaller team accomplishes a specific objective. As they reached the lobby, the scope of the confusion became apparent. Employees were gathering in designated areas outside the building, but the security guards were running between groups without clear coordination. Derek Walsh was trying to manage both the evacuation and his investigation of potential threats, resulting in chaos that would have been immediately apparent to anyone with actual emergency management training. Carmen positioned herself near the main entrance where she could observe both the evacuation process and the arrival of emergency responders. Her trained eye immediately identified several anomalies that the security team had missed completely. 3 men in business suits were moving against the flow of evacuating employees, heading toward the service elevators rather than the main exits. Their movement patterns suggested familiarity with the building layout that was inconsistent with being visitors or new employees. A delivery truck had arrived during the evacuation and was parked in a loading area that should have been secured during emergency procedures. The driver was not visible, and the truck's position would block security cameras that monitored the building's rear entrance. Most concerning, Amanda Foster was nowhere to be seen among the evacuating employees, despite having been in the building when the alarm sounded. As office manager, she should have been coordinating with security during any emergency situation. Captain O'Brien, Carmen said quietly. "I need to tell you something that's going to sound paranoid, but I think we're watching a coordinated operation unfold in real time." O'Brien had been conducting his own threat assessment and had reached similar conclusions. The men moving toward the service elevators, the delivery truck, the missing office manager, any one of these could be explained individually, but together they suggest systematic infiltration. Derek Walsh approached them with his radio still crackling with confused reports from his team. "Captain, I hate to interrupt your assessment, but we've got a situation here. The fire department can't find any evidence of actual fire, but someone definitely triggered the alarm manually from the 22nd floor. The research and development level," O'Brien noted, "where Apex Technologies keeps their most sensitive projects." Carmen felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that had carried her through countless dangerous situations. The 22nd floor was exactly where a sophisticated adversary would strike if they wanted to access classified defense contracts without triggering automatic security protocols. "Mr. Walsh," she said, her voice taking on an authority that immediately caught Derek's attention, "you need to lock down the building immediately. No one in or out until you can verify that all personnel are accounted for." Derek stared at her in confusion. "Excuse me? I don't take orders from cleaning staff. You'll take them from me," O'Brien said firmly. "And she's right. This has all the characteristics of a diversionary operation designed to mask unauthorized access to classified materials." Tyler Brooks had overheard the conversation and approached with the skepticism of someone who couldn't process information that challenged his assumptions. "Are you seriously suggesting that the cleaning lady knows more about security than we do?" Carmen exchanged a look with O'Brien, realizing that maintaining her cover was no longer possible if they were going to respond effectively to the threats they had identified. "My name is Sofia Martinez," she said, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone revealing classified information. "I'm a former Navy SEAL, and I've been monitoring this facility for 3 years because intelligence indicated it might be targeted for exactly this type of operation." The silence that followed was broken only by the continued wailing of the fire alarm and the distant sound of emergency vehicles approaching the building. Derek Walsh's face went through several expressions: confusion, disbelief, anger, and finally a dawning recognition that everything he thought he knew about the situation had just changed completely. "You're telling me," he said slowly, "that the woman we've been calling Maria for 3 years is actually some kind of secret agent?" "I'm telling you," Carmen replied, "that the people who just infiltrated your building are the same people who once tried to acquire nuclear materials for use against American cities. And if they succeed in accessing Apex Technologies' classified projects, they'll have the capability to conduct attacks that make 9/11s look like a warning shot." Frank Morrison's voice crackled through Derek's radio with increasing urgency. "Derek, you need to get down here. The delivery truck is gone, but there's equipment missing from the loading dock. Industrial-grade cutting tools, security access cards, and something that looks like it might be explosives." O'Brien grabbed Derek's radio. "This is Captain O'Brien. I'm implementing emergency security protocols under federal authority. Lock down all building access immediately and contact federal law enforcement. We have a confirmed security breach in progress." Carmen was already moving toward the building entrance, her posture now completely transformed from the humble cleaning lady into the tactical operative she had always been underneath. "Where are you going?" O'Brien called after her. "To stop them," Carmen replied without looking back. "This is what I was trained for." As she disappeared into the building against the flow of evacuating employees, Derek Walsh finally understood that his comfortable assumptions about security, authority, and the people around him had just been shattered by someone he had spent 3 years dismissing as insignificant. The battle for Pinnacle Corporate Center was about to begin, and the Woman he had known as Maria was walking into with skills and experience that he was only beginning to comprehend. Sofia Martinez moved through Pinnacle Corporate Center with the fluid precision of someone returning to their natural element. 3 years of pushing the cleaning cart had not diminished the tactical instincts that had been forged in the world's most dangerous environments. If anything, her intimate knowledge of the building's layout, security systems, and daily rhythms gave her advantages that even her original SEL training hadn't provided. The service elevator that the 3 intruders had used was still operational, despite the fire alarm confirming that they had sophisticated knowledge of the building's emergency systems. Sofia took the stairs instead, moving with controlled speed toward the 22nd floor where Apex Technologies housed their most sensitive research and development projects. Her cleaning uniform, which had been a disguise for 3 years, now became tactical camouflage. Security cameras that might have flagged an unknown person in military gear would register her presence as routine maintenance activity. Even during an emergency evacuation, Captain O'Brien's voice crackled through the radio she had taken from Derek Walsh. Sofia, federal backup is 20 minutes out. Can you maintain visual contact with the hostiles without engaging? Negative, she replied quietly as she reached the 20th floor. Based on their timing and coordination, they have a narrow extraction window. If they complete their objective and escape, the intelligence they steal could compromise national security for decades. She paused at the stairwell door to the 22nd floor, listening for sounds that would indicate the intruder's location and activity level. The research and development area was divided into multiple secure laboratories, each containing different aspects of Apex Technologies' classified projects. The intruders would need to know exactly which laboratory contained the most valuable information, suggesting inside knowledge or sophisticated intelligence preparation. Sofia's radio crackled again, this time with Derek Walsh's voice, panic barely controlled. The missing office manager, Amanda Foster, just appeared on security cameras entering the building through a service entrance. She's moving toward the executive floors with what looks like access cards and technical equipment. The pieces of the operation clicked into place in Sofia's mind. Amanda Foster wasn't a kidnapping victim. She was the inside asset who had been providing intelligence and access capabilities to the hostile team. Her friendly overtures to Sofia over the past few weeks hadn't been genuine kindness. They had been intelligence gathering to assess whether the cleaning lady posed any threat to their operation. O'Brien, Amanda Foster is the inside asset, Sofia transmitted. She's been conducting surveillance on building security and personnel for weeks, possibly months. Her access to facilities management gives her the ability to override security protocols and provide real-time intelligence to the infiltration team. Sofia opened the stairwell door carefully, revealing a hallway that should have been empty during evacuation procedures, but instead showed clear signs of forced entry into the hypersonic weapons guidance laboratory. The door's biometric scanner had been bypassed using sophisticated electronic equipment, and the laboratory's internal security cameras had been covered with metallic film that would block their transmission capabilities. Through the laboratory's reinforced windows, Sofia could see 2 men working systematically to extract data from secured computer systems. Their equipment was military-grade, designed for rapid acquisition of classified information without leaving traces of the intrusion. A third person, Amanda Foster, was coordinating their activities while monitoring multiple communication devices. For updates from external support, Sofia's training automatically cataloged the tactical situation. 3 hostiles in a confined space with limited escape routes, sophisticated equipment that indicated professional backing and time pressure. That would make them increasingly dangerous as their extraction window narrowed. Standard protocol would be to establish containment and wait for backup, but the value of the intelligence they were stealing made immediate action necessary. She opened her radio to O'Brien. 3 hostiles in the guidance systems. Laboratory. They're extracting data on hypersonic weapons targeting protocols. If that information reaches hostile actors, American defense capabilities could be compromised globally. Sophia, wait for backup. That's an order. With respect, Captain, I don't take orders from the Navy anymore, Sophia replied. And some things are more important than following protocol. Sophia moved down the hallway with the silent precision that had earned her unit the designation of ghosts during their operational period. The intruders were focused on their technical extraction and hadn't posted security, an oversight that suggested either overconfidence or inadequate tactical planning. Laboratory door was propped open to facilitate rapid extraction, giving Sophia a clear view of the operation in progress. Amanda Foster was standing near the entrance, coordinating communications while the 2 technical specialists worked on accessing encrypted files that contained guidance algorithms for hypersonic weapon systems. Sophia recognized the type of equipment. They were using sophisticated data extraction tools that could bypass most commercial security systems but would be ineffective against the military-grade encryption protecting the most sensitive files. They would need Amanda's administrative access codes to reach the classified materials that represented the real prize of their operation. Timeline for completion? Amanda was asking into her communication device. 15 minutes for basic extraction. 30 minutes for complete package, one of the technical specialists replied. But we need your access codes for the deep storage files. Federal response is estimated at 25 minutes, Amanda confirmed. We have sufficient window for complete extraction. Sophia realized that waiting for backup would allow the intruders to complete their mission successfully. The intelligence they were stealing could enable hostile actors to develop countermeasures against American hypersonic weapons or worse, to create their own guidance systems using stolen American technology. She keyed her radio one final time. O'Brien, if they complete this extraction, they'll have the capability to neutralize American strategic defense advantages. I'm going in. Sophia. Negative. Wait for. Sophia turned off the radio and moved toward the laboratory entrance with the focused calm that had carried her through countless dangerous situations. Amanda Foster was positioned with her back to the doorway, focused on her coordination responsibilities and unaware that the cleaning lady she'd been gathering intelligence on for weeks was now approaching with skills and intentions that would transform their carefully planned operation into a nightmare. The 2 technical specialists were bent over their equipment, completely absorbed in their data extraction efforts. Their positioning gave Sophia clear approach routes and multiple tactical options, none of which they would be able to counter effectively given their focus on technical rather than security priorities. Sophia paused at the laboratory entrance, taking a moment to center herself using breathing techniques that had been drilled into her during years of high-stress training. In a few seconds, she would transition from cleaning lady to active operative, using skills that officially didn't exist to protect national security interests that couldn't be publicly acknowledged. The woman who had endured 3 years of mockery from security guards was about to demonstrate exactly why SEAL Team 19 had been considered the most elite unit in American Special Operations. And when she was finished, no one would ever again mistake her quiet competence for weakness or insignificance. Sophia entered the laboratory with the fluid silence of someone who had perfected the art of moving unseen through hostile territory. Her approach was methodical and professional. Neutralize the greatest threat first, secure the intelligence, then deal with secondary objectives. Amanda Foster, positioned near the communication equipment, represented the coordination hub of the operation and therefore the primary target. The takedown was swift and efficient. Amanda Foster never heard Sophia approaching, never saw the movement that rendered her unconscious, and never had the opportunity to alert the technical specialists that their operation had been compromised. Years of SEAL training had taught Sophia that the most effective combat operations were the ones that ended before the enemy realized they had begun. The two technical specialists, absorbed in their data extraction efforts, didn't notice their coordinator's sudden silence until Sophia was already repositioning herself for the next phase of the engagement. When they finally looked up from their equipment, they found themselves facing a woman who had transformed completely from the humble cleaning lady they might have glimpsed in the hallways. "Step away from the computers," Sophia said quietly, her voice carrying the absolute authority of someone who expected immediate compliance. "Keep your hands visible and move toward the wall." The men exchanged a look that spoke of training and coordination, but before they could act on whatever plan they were formulating, Sophia continued, "I'm former Navy SEAL Team 19, and I've been monitoring this facility for 3 years, specifically to prevent this type of operation. You have approximately 15 seconds to decide whether you want to cooperate or discover why my unit was considered the most effective special operations force in American military history." The technical specialists were professionals, but they weren't combat operatives. Faced with someone whose training and experience clearly exceeded their own, they made the smart choice and moved away from the equipment with their hands raised. Sophia secured the laboratory quickly and efficiently, using techniques that Derek Walsh and his security team couldn't have imagined. She disabled the intruders' communication equipment, secured their extraction tools, and ensured that the stolen data couldn't be transmitted to external receivers. Captain O'Brien's voice crackled through her radio. "Sophia, Federal response teams are entering the building. What's your status?" "Laboratory secured, 3 hostiles in custody, data extraction prevented," Sophia replied. "The stolen files are still encrypted and haven't been transmitted. Intelligence compromise has been prevented." "Outstanding work. Are you injured?" "Negative. The operation is complete." But even as Sophia reported success, she knew that the real consequences of this day were just beginning. Her cover as Carmen Delgado had been completely blown, witnessed by security guards, building management, and federal law enforcement. The quiet life she had built over 3 years was ending, and she would need to decide what came next. Derek Walsh was among the first to reach the 22nd floor when federal agents gave the all-clear. He found Sophia calmly waiting near the secured laboratory, her posture relaxed but alert. The transformation from the woman he had mockingly called Maria to the professional operative who had just prevented a major intelligence breach was so complete that he struggled to process what he was seeing. "I don't understand," Derek said, his voice carrying a mixture of confusion and something that might have been respect. "You've been here for 3 years. You cleaned our offices, fixed our equipment, listened to us... Why didn't you ever say anything?" Sophia considered her answer carefully. "Because saying something would have compromised my ability to monitor potential threats. And because sometimes the most effective protection comes from people who appear to pose no threat at all." Tyler Brooks and Frank Morrison arrived shortly after, both of them staring at Sophia with expressions that suggested their entire worldview was being rebuilt in real time. The woman they had dismissed as ignorant and insignificant had just demonstrated capabilities that exceeded anything they had thought possible. "Ma'am," Tyler said quietly, his usual arrogance completely absent, "I owe you an apology." "We all do. We had no idea who you were or what you were doing here. You weren't supposed to know," Sophia replied gently. That was the point. Frank Morrison, who had spent 3 years making jokes about her background and capabilities, seemed to be struggling with the cognitive dissonance between his assumptions and reality. "All those times we gave you grief about your tattoo, about your accent, about your job. You could have shut us down any time you wanted." "Why would I want to do that?" Sophia asked. "You were doing exactly what I needed you to do, treating me like I was invisible and unimportant. It was perfect cover." Amanda Foster was taken into federal custody. along with the 2 technical specialists and evidence of their extraction operation. The investigation would eventually reveal that the breach had been planned for months, with Amanda providing detailed intelligence about building security, personnel patterns, and the location of classified materials. Captain O'Brien found Sophia as she was being debriefed by federal agents. "What happens now?" he asked. "Now I have to decide whether Carmen Delgado disappears forever or whether Sofia Martinez finds a new way to serve," she replied. 3 years of quiet life have been good for me, but this incident proves that the threats we faced during our operational period haven't disappeared. They've just evolved. O'Brien nodded, understanding the weight of the decision she faced. "For what it's worth, you saved American lives today. The intelligence they were trying to steal could have compromised defensive capabilities that protect millions of people." As the federal investigation continued around them, Derek Walsh approached Sophia one final time. His expression showed a mixture of embarrassment and genuine respect that would have been unimaginable that morning. "Sophia, can I call you Sophia now? I want you to know that if you decide to stay, things will be different. Will be different. What we did, how we treated you, it was wrong on every level." Sophia studied his face, seeing something she hadn't expected: genuine remorse and a willingness to change. "Derek, you treated me exactly the way I wanted to be treated. I needed to be invisible, and you helped make that possible. In a strange way, you were protecting me by dismissing me. But we could have been better. We should have been better." "You can be better going forward," Sophia agreed. "And maybe that's enough." As the investigation wound down and the building was secured, Sophia found herself standing in the lobby where she had endured 3 years of casual cruelty and dismissive comments. The security desk where Derek Walsh had made his jokes. The elevator where Tyler Brooks had questioned her intelligence. The floors she had cleaned while cataloging security vulnerabilities. All of it looked different now, seen through the lens of her revealed identity. Amanda Foster, being led away in federal custody, caught Sophia's eye one final time. "You played your role perfectly," she said bitterly. "I never suspected." "That was the point," Sophia replied quietly. As the federal agents completed their work and began leaving the building, Captain O'Brien approached Sophia with a question that would determine the next phase of her life. "The Navy has been looking for people with your skills and experience," he said. "There are threats emerging that require the kind of capabilities that SEAL Team 19 was designed to handle. Officially, you're still dead. But unofficially, your country could use your service again." Sophia looked around the lobby of Pinnacle Corporate Center, seeing the security guards who had learned to treat her with respect, the building that had been her home for 3 years, and the quiet life that had given her peace after years of dangerous service. "Can I think about it?" she asked. "Take all the time you need," O'Brien replied. "But remember, heroes don't always wear uniforms. Sometimes they wear cleaning smocks and push mops, protecting people who never know they need protection." As Sophia walked out of Pinnacle Corporate Center that evening, she realized that whether she remained Carmen Delgado or returned to being Sofia Martinez, she would always be someone who understood that true strength doesn't need to be loud, that real heroes often work in silence, and that sometimes the most important battles are fought by people who choose never to fight at all until fighting becomes the only way to protect the people they care about. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.